Hello again, it's Mr. Pete, and I'm down here in Studio B, and I've got something interesting to show you or tell you, but it's really historical in nature. So if you're not interested in the history of technology and tools, well, you can turn this off right now. There'll be no chips made, but to me, this is incredibly interesting. So in a recent video, and I'll put the title on the screen, I went to an auction and I bought quite a few items, including these 3 micrometers, but many other items as well. And I had been talking about REED and SCHER TUMICO and George Scheer and all those companies, but I suddenly came across 3 micrometers made by REED, or tubular micrometer, all different companies. So I'm going to tell you the history of that if I can. It's very, very difficult to find out any information on this. I did find a little bit on the internet, but there was nothing on vintage machinery, and I have found that the best way of researching this was to actually look at micrometers during the years they were made. So these are all marked, well, let me tell you, the smaller one here is marked REED Small Tool Company. Both of the other ones, actually this one is also REED. These 2 are REEDs, and this one is Tubular Micrometer, which later became TUMICO. So I'm going to show you a little chart of that and what videos to watch. And also, I think you know, very recently I made an extremely popular video on the decline and fall of SCHERR tools, and I'll flash that on the screen too in case you haven't seen it. But I think everybody in the world has watched that with great interest, and I think I also told you that I have renewed interest in Mitutoyo tools, and I do have an invite from Mitutoyo of America to come up to their facility in Aurora, Illinois, and meet them and all that. So I think I got a new thing going here with Mitutoyo, which I have always loved. They are extremely fine, and possibly they will become the premier brand now because of the decline and fall, sadly, of Starrett and Brown and Sharp and Lufkin are gone, and many of these other great companies. So let's get at it. I think you know that years ago there were many companies making micrometers besides the companies that we are more familiar with, like Starrett and Mitutoyo. But here is a history of SCHERR TUMICO company and all of the companies that were combined to become SCHERR TUMICO, and this is the best that I could come up with. I invite your corrections in the comments. But way back in around the First World War, I think, the REED Small Tool Company out of Worcester, Massachusetts, was a big maker of micrometers, but they made a lot of other things too in the way of small tools. It wasn't just micrometers. And then there was another company in New York, probably right downtown Manhattan as far as I know, called the George Scheer Company. And that was probably during the 30s, maybe even into the 40s, I'm not sure. But the George Scheer Company made a lot of other things and imported a lot of items. I don't think they made everything, including optical comparators. I'll show you a picture of that. And gauge blocks and measuring tools of all kinds and other related things. And George Scheer Company imported many items from Europe at that time. That was before we were dealing with communist China. And they were quality items from Germany, Switzerland, and he had an affiliation with Mauser Company, and he imported some of their tools that said Mauser on it, but also it said George Scheer, and I'll show you a picture of that in a minute. And then there was a company in St. James, Minnesota by the name of Tubular Micrometer Company, and I've talked about them before. And they were bought out by George Scheer as far as I can figure, or was it Tubular that bought out George Scheer? I don't know. I think Scheer bought them out, and at some point changed the name to SCHER TUMICO. also in St. James, and that was around until about 15 years ago, and they are excellent tools. They were always excellent tools, so if you run across any of those, be sure and pick them up. Be sure and watch this video if you have not already, and in that video is when I bought these micrometers as well as massive quantities of other tools. So to refresh your memory, these tools were bought at that auction, and this particular one, which is a 1" to 2" was made by, can you read that? I hope you can read that, REED Small Tool Company. Boy, that sure doesn't show up, in Worcester. And it's in pretty good shape. And I want you to pay very careful attention now to this casting pattern that you see here on all three of these micrometers. And this 4 to 5" micrometer also is marked REED Small Tool Works. You think they would stamp it someplace out here, but it's strictly on the thimble. But this 5 to 6" micrometer, again, the frames look similar, not similar, identical, but this is not a REED. This was after it was bought out by Tubular Micrometer Company. Again, difficult to see. In Minnesota. So we've got two companies there that are basically using the same castings and patterns and patents and probably all of that. These are pretty nice micrometers, and they will appear in Pete Bay very soon, and I'm making this video in April of 2024. Now, if you haven't watched my other videos, you may wonder, what's with the name tubular micrometer? That doesn't make any sense at all. But these two mics, which I've had for quite a while already, are simply marked Tubular Micrometer Company here, and I think these are quite a bit newer because they are satin chrome. This is a blade type, and this is just a, what is it, a 2 to 3, I believe. But what I'm showing you here is that tubular micrometers, and not all of them were that way, but the ones that truly are tubular are hollow. They were made from a tube. Why? Well, to reduce the weight. Well, who cares with a smaller micrometer whether it weighs 2 ounces or 3 ounces? But they made micrometers that were 2 feet, 3 feet, 5 foot, and so on. Think how heavy they would be if they were a solid material rather than a tube. Now, this company is out of business, but I do notice in the latest Starrett catalogs that they are making tubular micrometers in their larger sizes. Is this history interesting to you? Because to me, it's absolutely fascinating. Also, I was reading that, believe it or not, these frames that are tubular are more rigid than these in the larger sizes. They say that in the, like a 3-foot micrometer sometimes has a bit of a spongy feeling as you come up and are making your measurement. I don't know if that's true. I've never used a micrometer that large. So now you see where the name tubular micrometer came from. But that's a long name that's difficult to stamp. It takes up too much room, so they changed it to TUMICO. And for years and years, I've said this before, I thought that was an Oriental company. TUMICO, George TUMICO, Toyo. But no, it's very much American, USA. This little brochure catalog is probably from the 90s, or, you know, it's 20 or 30 years old. But the reason I'm showing you this is, well, twofold. Really, at some point, rather than just calling it Shear TUMICO, I believe they changed it to Shear TUMICO Industries for whatever reason. But the reason I'm showing you this, I think is incredibly fascinating. Even though this isn't that old, notice what the frame looks like here. Identical to these frames. So they were using the same patterns, again, as I said a minute ago, and probably patents and all of that. So they didn't start from scratch, although they certainly are a lot different from these. And if you look through some of the older Shear TUMICO literature, if you can find it, You will notice that they showed tubular micrometers and solid frame micrometers in the same catalogs. I wish I had a more modern Shear-TUMICO catalog, but you're going to see, besides micrometers in here, they made a lot of other things. Depth micrometers, vernier calipers, height gauges, and I do have one of their height gauges I'll show sometime. Dial calipers, but I think, and you may remember that I had a beautiful Shear-TUMICO optical comparator, and it was worth nothing. I had to give it away. I absolutely could not sell that thing. So I just plain gave it away, and there's a video on that as well. Now, Shear-TUMICO made a lot of tools for Sears Roebuck and probably other companies as well. So if you ever run across more modern Craftsman micrometers, they probably were made by Shear-TUMICO, and they are excellent. Every bit as good as the major players. Now, if you viewers out there like this type of video, I will be doing another one on Slocum. These three are Slocum micrometers, and I do have one of their old catalogs. And remember, Mr. Slocum is the man that actually invented the combination center drill that we all use today. And that information is free of charge. Please watch this video of mine if you have not already seen it. 120,000 people have watched it and loved it. I know this is a terrible picture, but here is an advertisement for the George Scherer Company. Notice that in addition to micrometers, he was selling gauge blocks. Many years ago, George Scherer either manufactured machinist tool chests, although I would think he probably just had someone else make them for him with his name on it, and there on that little decal it says George Scherer. This is the backside of a Mauser vernier caliper, and you can readily see that it was made in Germany by Mauser, which it says on the other side, George Scherer Company, New York 12, long before zip codes. The George Scherer Company sold a lot of machinery too, but I suspect it was made for them and they were just distributing it. This is the cover of a 1934 REED micrometer catalog. Hopefully you watched my recent video on this beautiful little steam engine, which is a retro brand and given to me by DIYengine.com. And look what they sent me, a tiny little hit and miss engine, which I will be making a video for. Don't confuse it with this Ertl model, given to me by Troy, but inside this box is a $500 hit and miss engine that will actually run. So watch for that video. You know, to me, micrometers are my favorite measuring instrument. I prefer them over vernier calipers or dial calipers or digital calipers, especially on the lathe. I like to use a micrometer when I'm measuring diameters on the lathe, not a caliper, but of course that's my personal preference. Now, if you like this type of video, please give me a thumbs up for my failing channel here so we can see if I can boost it up a little bit. Let me know what kind of videos you want, but I can't make one-of-a-kind videos, just somebody needs to know how to do something on their lathe. I'm trying for a broad appeal and I'm not able to do that, so perhaps with some suggestions here in the final few years of making videos, I can find something that appeals to people. So, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.